There are moments in life when silence grows slowly between people, not because they stop caring, not because they forget the past, but because time quietly places distance where closeness once lived. Sometimes a single misunderstanding becomes a wall. Sometimes pride becomes a locked door. And sometimes years pass before anyone realizes how long the silence has lasted. Have you ever stopped speaking to someone who once meant a great deal to you? A friend, a brother, a sister, a parent. At first, the silence feels temporary. You believe the conversation will return tomorrow, or next week, or next month. But life moves forward. Days turn into months. Months slowly turn into years, and the silence becomes part of everyday life. This is the story of two brothers. Their names were Daniel and Michael. When they were young, people in their small town often spoke about how close they were. They were only 2 years apart in age. Daniel, the older brother, was thoughtful and careful. Michael, the younger one, was energetic and curious about everything. As children, they spent most of their days together. They built small wooden forts in the backyard. They raced their bicycles down the quiet streets of their neighborhood. They explored nearby woods and imagined grand adventures among the trees. Their parents often joked that the two boys were like shadows of each other. Where one went, the other followed. If Daniel was reading a book, Michael would sit beside him asking questions. If Michael discovered something interesting outside, he would run inside to show Daniel. And every night, either their mother would call them both to dinner. "Boys, wash your hands," she would say. Moments later, the sound of running feet filled the house. Those evenings were simple but warm. The family sat around a small wooden table. Their father told stories about his day at work. Their mother laughed at the boys' playful arguments. Sometimes the brothers competed to see who could finish their vegetables first. Other nights, they tried to make each other laugh while pretending to be serious. Life felt steady then, safe, predictable. Years passed. The boys grew older, school became more demanding. Responsibilities slowly appeared. But even as teenagers, Daniel and Michael remained close. They helped each other with homework. They watched late-night movies together when their parents had gone to bed. And on quiet weekends, they still rode their bicycles along the same roads they had explored as children. Their parents watched them with quiet happiness. Because in many families, brothers sometimes grow distant with age, but Daniel and Michael still felt like a team. Until the year everything changed. It happened during a difficult time for their family. Their father had grown ill. At first, the illness seemed small, just fatigue, just occasional pain. But over time, it became something more serious. Hospital visits became more frequent. Their mother looked tired more often. The warm evenings at the dinner table slowly disappeared. Daniel, being the older brother, tried to become responsible quickly. He helped his mother with chores. He spoke with doctors. He tried to stay calm for everyone else. Michael reacted differently. He became restless, frustrated, sometimes angry without fully understanding why. Watching someone you love grow weaker can create many confusing emotions: fear, sadness, helplessness. Neither brother knew how to express those feelings clearly. And during one long, difficult week in the hospital, something happened that neither of them expected. A disagreement began with something small. It started with a conversation about their father's care. Daniel believed they should follow the doctor's advice carefully. Michael believed they should try other treatments that he had read about online. The conversation grew tense. Voices became louder. Words became sharper. Their mother tried to calm them, but emotions were already rising. And then Michael said something he did not truly mean. "You always think you know what's best." Daniel felt hurt. "And you never listen," he replied. The argument ended quickly, but the damage remained. After their father passed away several months later, the family felt broken in many quiet ways. Grief filled the house, and the distance between the two brothers slowly grew. At first, they simply spoke less often. Then they stopped calling each other. Family gatherings became uncomfortable. Sometimes one brother attended while the other stayed away. Eventually, they stopped meeting entirely. Years passed. 5 years, then 10. Their lives moved in different directions. Daniel moved to another city for work. Michael started a small business in their hometown. Both built their own routines, their own friendships, their own lives. But deep inside, and something always remained unfinished. Neither brother ever forgot the other. They simply stopped knowing how to begin again. One quiet autumn afternoon, many years later, Daniel returned to the old family house. Their mother had recently moved to a smaller apartment nearby. The house needed to be cleaned before it could be sold. Dust covered the furniture. Sunlight entered through the same windows that once warmed the family dinner table. Daniel walked slowly through each room. Memories appeared everywhere. In the hallway, in the kitchen, in the backyard. And then, in a small wooden cabinet in the living room, he found something unexpected, an old photo album. Its cover was worn with age. The pages inside were slightly yellow, but as Daniel opened it, he immediately recognized the pictures. Childhood photographs, family vacations, birthday parties, two young brothers smiling beside each other. For a long moment, Daniel simply sat there holding the album, because sometimes a single photograph can bring back an entire lifetime of memories. And at that quiet moment, Daniel realized something important. Perhaps the silence between two brothers did not begin with anger. Perhaps it simply began with pain that neither of them knew how to share. Daniel remained seated on the floor of the living room for a long time, holding the old photo album in his hands. The house was quiet. Only the soft sound of wind outside moved through the trees in the yard. Dust floated gently in the sunlight that came through the window. For a moment, Daniel forgot why he had come back to the house. He had planned to clean the rooms, to sort through old belongings, to prepare the house so it could be sold. But now, none of those things felt important, because the photo album had quietly opened a door he had kept closed for many years. He slowly turned the first page. The photographs were old but carefully arranged. His mother had always loved keeping family memories safe. Each picture had a small handwritten note underneath. The first photo showed two very small boys sitting on the front steps of the house. Daniel looked closely. He immediately recognized the scene. He and Michael were no older than 4 and 6. They were wearing matching blue jackets. Their father had bought them those jackets during a family trip many years ago. In the picture, Michael was laughing loudly. Daniel was holding a toy car, and both of them looked completely carefree. Daniel felt a quiet smile appear on his face. He had not seen this picture in a very long time. He turned the next page. More photographs, birthday cakes, school pictures, summer afternoons in the backyard. In many of the photos, Daniel and Michael stood side by side. Sometimes they were smiling. Sometimes they were making funny faces. Sometimes they were covered in mud after playing outside. But in every photo, one thing was clear. They were always together. Daniel paused at a picture of the two brothers holding fishing rods beside a small lake. Their father stood behind them with his hands on their shoulders. Daniel remembered that day clearly. It had been early morning. The air had been cold. Michael had complained about waking up so early. But once they reached the lake, He became excited, and neither of them caught a fish that day. But their father had laughed and said something Daniel never forgot. Fishing isn't only about catching fish, he said. It's about spending time together. Daniel slowly touched the photograph with his fingers. For a moment, he could almost hear his father's voice again. He turned another page and another. The photos slowly moved forward through the years: school events, holiday dinners, family trips. Daniel noticed something interesting. Even as teenagers, the two brothers still appeared close. There was a picture from a school basketball game. Michael had his arm around Daniel's shoulder. Another photo showed them building a wooden treehouse in the backyard. They looked tired but proud of their work. Then Daniel reached a page where the photos suddenly changed. The pictures became fewer, and the smiles looked different. These photos were from the time when their father became ill. Daniel could see it now: the tension in their faces, the quiet worry in their mother's eyes. He turned the page slowly, and there it was, a photograph he had almost forgotten. It showed Daniel and Michael standing in the hospital hallway. Their father was sitting in a wheelchair. Their mother stood beside him. Everyone in the picture was smiling, but Daniel remembered that the smile had been forced, because that was the day the doctors had explained how serious the illness had become. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. That time had been so difficult, so confusing. Everyone had been afraid. Everyone had been tired. Everyone had been trying to stay strong. But no one had truly known how to talk about the fear they were feeling. Daniel opened his eyes again. He turned another page, but this page looked different. There were no photographs attached to it, only empty spaces where pictures had once been. Small corners of tape still remained on the paper. Daniel frowned slightly. He remembered this page. There had once been pictures here, pictures taken during the final months of their father's life. But those photos had been removed many years ago. Daniel thought for a moment. Then he suddenly remembered something. Michael had taken those pictures, not long after their father passed away. At the time, Daniel had thought Michael removed them because they were too painful to look at. But now Daniel wondered if there had been another reason. He carefully closed the album. The house felt even quieter now. Outside the window, the sky had begun to change colors. Late afternoon sunlight stretched across the wooden floor. Daniel stood up slowly. He walked to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. As he stood there, a strange thought appeared in his mind. For 10 years, he and Michael had avoided speaking to each other. 10 years of silence, 10 years of distance. And yet this small photo album had reminded him of something important. The argument that separated them had lasted only a few minutes. Just a few minutes. But the silence that followed had lasted 10 years. Daniel leaned against the kitchen counter. He wondered where Michael was at that moment. He knew his brothers still lived in the same town. Their mother occasionally mentioned him during phone calls. But Daniel had never asked many questions. Perhaps he'd been afraid of hearing the answers, or perhaps he had simply become used to the silence. Daniel looked back toward the living room where the photo album rested on the floor. For the first time in many years, he felt something unexpected. Not anger, not resentment, but curiosity. What would Michael think if he saw these pictures again? Would he remember the same stories, the same laughter, the same childhood moments? Daniel walked back into the living room and picked up the album again. As he held it, he noticed something tucked between the final pages. A small folded piece of paper. It looked old. The edges were slightly yellow. Daniel carefully opened it. Inside was a short handwritten note. The handwriting looked familiar. It was his mother's. The note said only one sentence: "Some memories are waiting for the right moment to bring people home again." Daniel read the sentence twice. Then he slowly sat down on the sofa. The house felt full of memories now, and for the first time in many years, Daniel began to wonder if the silence between two brothers might finally be ready to end. Daniel sat quietly in the living room, long after the sunlight had begun to fade. The old photo album rested open on the small wooden table beside him. The note from his mother still lay gently between the pages. Some memories are waiting for the right moment to bring people home again. The words felt simple, but they carried a meaning Daniel could not ignore. For many years, he had believed the silence between him and Michael was something permanent, like a door that had closed long ago, a door that neither of them would ever open again. But now, sitting in the quiet house filled with memories, Daniel began to question that belief. Perhaps the silence had lasted so long not because the door was locked, but because neither brother had found the courage to knock. Outside, the evening sky slowly turned darker. The familiar sounds of the neighborhood appeared one by one. A car passed down the street. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Leaves rustled softly in the wind. Daniel leaned back in the chair and closed his eyes. Memories continued to rise in his mind. Not the painful ones, but the small moments he had not thought about for years. The time he and Michael built a small wooden ramp for their bicycles in the backyard. They had spent an entire afternoon working on it, hammering nails, carrying pieces of wood, arguing about how tall it should be. When they finally finished, Michael insisted on trying it first. He rode down the ramp too fast and fell into the grass. For a moment, Daniel thought he might be hurt, but Michael simply started laughing. And soon Daniel was laughing too. Their father came outside to see what had happened. Instead of scolding them, he shook his head and said, "Well, at least the ramp works?" Daniel opened his eyes again. A quiet smile appeared on his face. Those were good memories, simple memories. And yet somehow those memories had been hidden behind years of silence. He looked again at the old photo album. Then he stood up and walked slowly toward the hallway. At the end of the hallway was a door he had not opened since he arrived earlier that day. Michael's old bedroom. Daniel hesitated for a moment before turning the handle. The door opened with a soft creak. The room looked almost exactly the same. Their mother had kept many things untouched. A small desk stood beside the window. Old posters were still attached to the wall, and a shelf held several items from Michael's childhood: model airplanes, old books, a small baseball glove. Daniel stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of old wood and paper. He walked toward the shelf and picked up the baseball glove. It felt stiff with age, but he immediately recognized it. Their father had given it to Michael for his 12th birthday. Daniel remembered the day clearly. Michael had been so excited that he ran outside immediately to try it. Daniel had joined him. They played catch in the backyard until the sun disappeared behind the trees. Daniel gently placed the glove back on the shelf. Then he noticed something else: a small box sitting near the corner of the desk. The box was made of dark wood. It looked familiar. Daniel slowly opened it. Inside were several photographs, but these were not the same ones he had seen in the album earlier. These were the missing pictures, the photos that had once been attached to the empty page. Daniel picked one up carefully. It showed Michael sitting beside their father in the hospital room. Their father looked tired but peaceful. Michael was holding his hand. The photograph was simple, but the emotion inside it was clear. Daniel picked up another photo. This one showed both brothers standing near the hospital window. Neither of them were smiling, but they were standing close together, closer than Daniel remembered. He studied the picture carefully. Something about it surprised him. In his memory, he had believed that he and Michael had already grown distant during that time. But the photo told a different story. They were still standing side by side, still facing the same difficult moment together. Daniel slowly sat down at the desk. One by one, he looked through the photographs. Each one showed moments from the final weeks of their father's life. Quiet moments, serious moments, moments filled with sadness, but also with care. Daniel suddenly realized something important. Michael had not removed these photos because he wanted to forget them. He had kept them, carefully, protected inside this small wooden box. Perhaps those memories had been too painful to leave in the album, but they had not been thrown away. Daniel held one of the photographs for a long time. It showed their father smiling weakly while both brothers sat beside the hospital bed. In that moment, something became clear in Daniel's mind. The argument that had separated them had happened during one of the most painful times in their lives. They had both been afraid, both been exhausted, both been trying to protect their father in the only ways they understood. And perhaps neither of them had truly meant the words they said that day. Daniel leaned back in the chair. For the first time in many years, the anger he once felt seemed smaller, much smaller. What remained instead was something else: regret, but also hope. He looked around the quiet room once more. The same walls, the same window, the same memories that once belonged to two brothers who had shared everything. Then Daniel made a decision, a simple one, but one that had taken 10 years to arrive. He carefully gathered the photographs. He placed them back into the wooden box. Then he picked up the old photo album from the living room. One by one, he returned the missing photographs to the empty page. When he finished, the album finally felt complete again. Daniel closed it gently. The house was very quiet now. But the silence felt different than before. It no longer felt like distance. Instead, it felt like the quiet moment before something important begins. Daniel looked at his phone on the table. He had not called Michael in 10 years, not once. But tonight, for the first time, he felt ready to change that. He picked up the phone slowly, and as he looked at the screen, he realized something surprising. He still remembered Michael's number. After all those years, he had never truly forgotten it. Daniel held the phone in his hand for a long moment. The screen glowed softly in the quiet living room. Michael's number was already typed in. All Daniel needed to do was press the call button. Such a small action, one simple movement of his finger. But after 10 years of silence, that small action felt surprisingly heavy. Daniel slowly walked toward the window. Outside, the street looked peaceful. A few lights were on in nearby houses, the same street where he and Michael had ridden their bicycles as children, the same street where they once raced each other home from school. So many memories lived in this place. And yet, for 10 years, neither brother had returned to those memories together. Daniel took a deep breath. He looked again at the phone. Then, finally, he pressed the call button. The sound of ringing filled the quiet room. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. Daniel suddenly felt nervous. Perhaps Michael would not answer. Perhaps he had changed his number. Perhaps he simply did not want to speak. The 4th ring sounded. Then the line clicked. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was calm but cautious. Daniel immediately recognized it. Michael. For a moment, Daniel said nothing. 10 years of silence can make the simplest words difficult to find. Then he finally spoke. Michael, it's Daniel. There was a long pause on the line. Daniel could hear faint sounds in the background, maybe traffic, maybe a television. But Michael did not speak immediately. For a moment, Daniel wondered if the call had disconnected. Then Michael's voice returned. Daniel? Yes. Another pause, not uncomfortable, just unexpected. It felt like both brothers were carefully stepping into unfamiliar territory. I didn't expect to hear from you, Michael said quietly. Daniel nodded, even though Michael could not see him. I know. I'm back in town, Daniel continued, at the house. This time the silence lasted a little longer. The house? Michael asked. Yes. I came to help Mom sort through things before it sold. Michael exhaled softly. I didn't know you were coming. I only decided a few days ago. Another quiet pause followed. Daniel looked at the photo album on the table. I found something today, he said. What? Michael asked. The old photo album. On the other end of the phone, Michael did not speak for several seconds. Then he asked softly, Is it still there? Yes. I've been looking through it. Daniel hesitated before continuing. And I found the photos. The ones you took out. Michael's voice changed slightly. You found them? Yes. They were in your old room, in the wooden box on your desk. Another long silence followed. When Michael spoke again, his voice sounded different, quieter. I wondered if anyone would ever see those again. Why did you keep them? Daniel asked gently. Michael took a slow breath before answering. Because I couldn't throw them away. They were the last photos of Dad. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. I know, he said quietly. For a few moments, neither brother spoke. The silence between them no longer felt cold. Instead, it felt careful, like two people slowly learning how to talk again. Then Daniel said something he had never said before. I'm sorry. The words came out quietly, but they were clear. I'm sorry for the way things ended between us. On the other end of the phone, Michael did not respond immediately. Daniel continued. That argument at the hospital? I shouldn't have spoken to you like that. I was angry and scared, and I thought I was protecting Dad. But I think we were both just trying to do the best we could. The silence that followed felt different now. Not distant, just thoughtful. Then Michael spoke. You know something strange? What? Daniel asked. I almost called you many times. Daniel was surprised. You did? Yes, especially during the first few years. But every time I picked up the phone, I didn't know what to say. Daniel understood that feeling perfectly. I felt the same way, he admitted. Michael laughed softly. 10 years of silence because two brothers didn't know how to start one conversation. Daniel smiled faintly. It sounds a little ridiculous when you say it like that. Yeah, Michael replied. But life can be strange like that. Daniel looked again at the old photo album. I put the photos back in the album today, he said. The ones from the hospital? Michael was quiet for a moment. Really? Yes. The album feels complete again. Another pause. Then Michael said something unexpected. Do you remember the fishing trip with Dad? Daniel laughed softly. The one where we didn't catch anything? Exactly. Michael chuckled. He said fishing wasn't about the fish. It was about spending time together. Daniel felt warmth in his chest. I was just thinking about that picture earlier today. The conversation continued slowly, not rushing, not trying to solve 10 years of distance all at once, just sharing small memories, old stories, moments from childhood. After a while, Daniel asked a simple question. Would you like to see the album again? Michael did not answer immediately. Then he said quietly, Yeah, I think I would. Daniel looked around the quiet house. You could come by tomorrow. It's still the same place, the same old living room, the same kitchen table. Michael was silent for a moment. Then he asked, Will you be there in the afternoon? Yes, I'll be here. Another short pause. Then Michael said something Daniel had not heard in many years. Okay, I'll come by. After the call ended, Daniel sat quietly in the living room. The phone rested on the table beside the photo album. Outside, the night had grown darker, but inside the house, something had changed. The silence between two brothers had lasted 10 years, but tonight, a single phone call had finally begun to open the door again. And tomorrow, for the first time in a very long time, two brothers would sit together again in the same room looking at the same memories that had once shaped their lives. The next morning arrived slowly. Soft sunlight entered the living room through the wide front window. The house felt peaceful. For Daniel, the quiet morning carried a feeling he had not experienced in many years, a feeling of anticipation. He woke earlier than usual. For a few moments, he simply lay in bed and listened to the familiar sounds of the house. The floorboards creaked softly as the temperature changed. A bird sang outside near the window. Somewhere in the distance, a car drove slowly down the street. The same quiet neighborhood where he and Michael had once grown up. Daniel sat up and looked toward the hallway. Later today, his brother would walk through the front door. The thought felt strange, but it also felt right. 10 years had passed. 10 years of birthdays missed. 10 years of holidays spent apart. 10 years of silence that had slowly become normal. But yesterday, with a single phone call, something had changed. Daniel got out of bed and walked to the kitchen. He made a simple breakfast: coffee, toast, and a small bowl of fruit. As he sat at the kitchen table, he remembered how different mornings had once been in this house. Their mother would prepare breakfast while Daniel and Michael argued about small things. Who used the bathroom first? Who left their shoes in the hallway? Who finished the last piece of toast? Their father would read the newspaper and occasionally shake his head at their arguments. Brothers shouldn't fight about toast, he would say. Daniel smiled at the memory. After breakfast, he walked into the living room. The photo album still rested on the coffee table where he had left it the night before. He picked it up gently and opened the cover. Page after page filled with memories. Childhood birthdays, family vacations, summer afternoons in the backyard. And finally, the last pages. The photographs from the hospital, the ones that had once been removed. Now they rested quietly in their original place. Daniel carefully closed the album. Then he placed it at the center of the table. The room was ready. The memories were ready. Now all that remained was the moment. Late in the afternoon, Daniel heard a car slow down outside. He stood near the window and looked toward the street. A dark blue sedan parked in front of the house. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out slowly. For a moment, Daniel simply watched. Time changes people in small ways. Michael looked older than the brother Daniel remembered. His hair showed small lines of gray. His posture seemed calmer. But the way he stood, the way he looked at the house, Daniel recognized it immediately. It was still his brother. Michael walked slowly toward the front door. For a brief second, he hesitated on the porch. Then he knocked. 3 gentle knocks. Daniel walked to the door. His hand paused on the handle for a moment. 10 years of distance existed on the other side, but the door opened easily. Michael stood there quietly. For a moment, neither brother spoke. They simply looked at each other. Time had changed many things, but some things remained familiar. Finally, Daniel smiled slightly. Hi, Michael. Michael nodded. Hey. The greeting felt simple, but it carried the weight of 10 silent years. Daniel stepped aside. Come in. Michael walked into the house slowly. His eyes moved around the living room. The place looks the same, he said. Mom kept most things the same, Daniel replied. Michael nodded. They walked toward the living room together. Then Michael noticed the photo album on the table. He stopped walking. Is that it? Daniel nodded. Yes. Michael approached the table slowly. For a moment, he simply looked at the closed album. Then he sat down on the couch. Daniel sat in the chair across from him. Michael opened the album carefully. The pages turned slowly. Every photograph carried a piece of their shared past. They did not rush. They stopped at certain pictures. Sometimes they smiled. Sometimes they simply nodded. This was the camping trip, Michael said at one point. The one where Dad forgot the tent poles. Daniel laughed. And we had to sleep in the car. Michael chuckled softly. That was uncomfortable. But we survived. They continued turning pages. The room remained quiet, but the silence felt warm, comfortable, the way silence can feel between people who understand each other. Eventually, Michael reached the final pages, the hospital photographs. His hand paused slightly. Then he looked at Daniel. And I didn't know if I was ready to see these again, Michael admitted. But now, I'm glad they're here. Daniel nodded. I think Dad would have wanted them to stay. Michael studied the final photograph, the one where both brothers sat beside their father. I remember this day, Michael said softly. Me too, Daniel replied. They sat quietly for a moment. Then Michael closed the album. I'm glad you called, he said. Daniel smiled. I'm glad you answered. For a while, they continued talking. About life, about work, about their mother, about the years they had missed. They did not try to solve everything in one afternoon. But something important had already happened. The silence between them had ended. As evening approached, Michael stood near the door preparing to leave. Will you be in town for a few more days? He asked. Yes, Daniel said. I still need to finish sorting things here. Michael nodded. Maybe we could have dinner tomorrow. Daniel smiled. I'd like that. Michael opened the door and stepped outside. Then he turned back for a moment. You know something? He said. What? Daniel asked. For 10 years, I thought the distance between us was permanent. Daniel nodded. I thought the same thing. Michael smiled slightly. Turns out, it was just waiting for the right moment. Daniel looked back toward the photo album resting on the table. Sometimes healing does not arrive with loud apologies or dramatic moments. Sometimes it begins quietly, with a photograph, with a memory, with a simple phone call. And sometimes, the memories that once carried pain can slowly become the bridge that brings a family home again. Thank you for listening to this gentle English story. If you enjoyed this calm story for English listening practice, remember that every story is also a chance to practice patience, understanding, and connection. Sometimes the most meaningful conversations in life begin after the longest silence.